we want to talk about is production possibility frontier. We know that production possibility frontier, it gives us different combinations that can be produced by the economy as a whole. तो अगर मैं बात करूं पॉइंट ए से पॉइंट बी की, ये मुझे बता रहा है कि ए पर गुड एक्स के इतने यूनिट्स प्रोड्यूस हो सकते हैं और वाई के इतने हो सकते हैं, और बी पर एक्स के इतने हो सकते हैं और वाई के इतने हो सकते हैं. Now try to understand that when I am going from A to B to increase the production of X, अगर मुझे X को बढ़ाना है, I must give up some amount of Y. So I have to give up some amount of Y. So the slope of this PPF, the slope of the production possibility frontier, that is known as opportunity cost. और ये क्या बताता है कि how much do you have to give up one good in order to produce the other good. अब इस PPF से रिलेटेड ना यू कैन गेट मल्टीपल क्वेश्चंस इन एग्जाम. जैसे फॉर एग्जांपल वो आपको बोल सकते हैं व्हाट हैपेंस इफ यू हैव अ PPF व्हिच इज अ लाइन. तो इसमें इसका स्लोप क्या होगा? सो यू हैव टू टेल दैट हियर यू हैव कांस्टेंट अपॉर्चुनिटी कॉस्ट. व्हाट हैपेंस इफ योर PPF इज इन फैक्ट लाइक दिस. अगर PPF ऐसा बना हुआ है, rather than concave it is convex, it means you have decreasing opportunity cost. What happens when your PPF is like this? It means you have increasing opportunity cost. So ये वाला चीज I have covered in one of your assignments and it's there in your mock papers also. But this can be asked in exam, that they can ask you what will happen to the opportunity cost if the PPF is a straight line. तो आपको पता होना चाहिए कि straight line में the PPF is having a constant opportunity cost. That's the first kind of question that can be asked in exam. Now, if I have to go ahead and I have to divide. Okay, thank you, beta. So you can open that PDF then. Usse we can do things more quickly. ठीक है. Now when we talk about microeconomic theory में what all we have to revise, पहले ये समझो. We have to be very sure with different theories of demand. मैं भी दिखाऊंगी what those theories of demand are. Then we have to be sure with the theories of production and cost. उसके बाद ना हमें एक फैक्टर प्राइसिंग के ऊपर एक एनालिसिस पता होना चाहिए. मतलब कि फॉर एग्जांपल इफ यू रिमेंबर वी डिड समथिंग लाइक दिस, that the wage paid will be equal to, real wage paid will be equal to marginal product of labor, or the real rent paid will be equal to the marginal product of capital. तो फैक्टर प्राइसिंग कैसे होती है, that is also important and you must be aware of the factor pricing concept. इस पे if you go to the basic lectures ना, you will find another chapter completely which talks about factor pricing and that's an important chapter. क्योंकि वो बताता है कि फैक्टर के प्राइस कैसे डिसाइड किए जाते हैं इकोनॉमी में, एंड यू मे गेट एन MCQ बेस्ड ऑन दैट. Then beta the next thing that we have to talk about is the theory of economic welfare, and इसमें 3 to 4 more concepts are there जिसमें आपको एकदम certain होना पड़ेगा, like general equilibrium. Definitely it can be asked in exam. Like you have to be very certain with externality concept and with public good. बहुत rare chance है, but they may go ahead and they may ask you a numerical, very rarely, but I will do 2-3 numericals on this. They may ask you numerical on asymmetric information or moral hazard. But whatever is important from this numerical side, I will show that to you. मैं आपको बताऊंगी कि कौन से numerical हमको यहाँ पर करने. Now, if you go ahead and you talk about subjects, paper like GATE, paper like CUET, तो उसमें ना sometimes they may go ahead and ask you some names also. जैसे who gave the theory of indifference curve? So you should know Hicks and Allen. Who gave the theory of cardinal utility? You should know it as Marshall. So a lot of times they may go ahead and ask you certain names. So before I just go and deep dive into this, if you just go ahead and you look into the portal, you will see these 3 videos are important. एक दिया होगा 100 economists के ऊपर एक वीडियो होगी बेटा, who gave what. ये important है, बहुत important है, because you have to remember at least these 100 economists कि किसने क्या दिया है. That is important. जैसे if I ask you who gave innovation theory, तो आपको पता होना चाहिए Schumpeter gave innovation theory. That's the first thing. The second thing is मैंने माइक्रो एंड मैक्रो की थ्योरीज पे क्रोनोलॉजी प्रिपेयर की है. right? This chronology actually goes ahead and tells you कि किस order में theories actually economy में economics में आई हैं. For example, they may go ahead and ask you कि I am giving you 4 theories. First theory हो गई, ये आपको question bank में भी दिखेगा CUET के. जैसे for example, they may go ahead and they may ask you that the first theory is indifference curve. The second is cardinal utility. The third is revealed preferences. The fourth is say something related to risk, right? Newman Morgenstern theory. ऐसा कुछ करके 4 theories दे दी. Then they may ask you that arrange them in the chronological order. So in that case, you need to know कि कौन सी theory पहले आई और कौन सी theory बाद में आई. I have to be well aware of that concept. So the years in which these theories were released is also very important. बहुत सारे नहीं याद करने, but at least whatever I have given you in those video, उतना you should be aware of कि which theory came in which year. That is also important. Now there is a concept which is known as dynamics. Dynamics का क्या मतलब रहता है? That if I just go ahead and I tell you that variables are a function of time. Just if I tell you that supply depends on price, but it depends on previous year's price. Yeah, I tell you demand depends on price, but it depends on current year price. So whenever I am linking the variable to prices, जब भी हम variable को price से link करते हैं, उसको हम डायनामिक्स बोलते हैं. वी कॉल दैट एज डायनामिक्स. तो इस डायनामिक्स की ना बहुत लोगों ने अलग अलग डेफिनेशंस दी हैं. जैसे फॉर एग्जांपल हिक्स ने बोला डायनामिक्स के लिए इकोनॉमिक डायनामिक्स those part where every quantity must be dated. So sometimes they may ask you some statements that who stated that economics dynamics is where everything is dated. So these statements may also be important. Yes, beta 100 economics and micro is also important for IIT because sometimes in 1 mark questions they may give you who gave what. Also, if you get selected in the IIT JAM paper, then sometimes IIT will keep its own exam. जैसे पिछली बारी IIT कानपुर ने अपना अलग से एग्जाम रख दिया था, IIT दिल्ली ने अपना अलग से एग्जाम रख दिया था. So in that also they may go ahead and they may give you an MCQ based on the economist. So it is always a good idea to know who gave what, right? Okay. So now we need to go ahead and we need to talk about the demand function. Is my voice low for others also? Okay, cool. Thank you. So demand function very basically just means that we are going ahead and we are writing quantity demanded as a function of different variables. This is very, very basic. Different variables के बारे में income, price of related good, taste and advertising. Now, you have to remember that most of the time the demand function is a linear function. So अगर वो आपको क्वेश्चन में generalized demand function बोल देते हैं, that consider a general demand function, it means that they are assuming that the demand function is a linear demand function of the format A minus B T. Then we know the law of demand that there is inverse relationship between price and quantity demanded. So I'm just skipping this part, you can read through. अब क्या है कि डिमांड फंक्शन जो डिमांड कर्व है इट इज डाउनवर्ड स्लोपिंग. बट इफ समवन आस्क्स यू व्हाट इज द रीजन, क्यों है ये डाउनवर्ड स्लोपिंग, किस वजह से, सो बोथ इफेक्ट साइमल्टेनियसली, इनकम इफेक्ट एंड सब्स्टिट्यूशन इफेक्ट टुगेदर अकाउंट फॉर द डिमांड फंक्शन टू बी डाउनवर्ड स्लोपिंग. देखो अगर यहाँ पर एक क्वेश्चन आता है जो मैं बाद में नेक्स्ट सेशन में लूंगी, बट अगर हम बात करते हैं टाइप्स ऑफ गुड्स की, तो हमें पता है कि 3 तरीके के गुड हो सकते हैं, नॉर्मल गुड, इंफीरियर गुड और गिफन गुड. और वी नो दैट देयर आर 2 इफेक्ट्स, वन इज द सब्स्टिट्यूशन इफेक्ट, वन इज द इनकम इफेक्ट. अब ये बहुत बच्चों ने मेरे से बहुत बारी ग्रुप पे पूछा है दैट मैम शुड वी ऑलवेज एज्यूम कि सब्स्टिट्यूशन इफेक्ट इज नेगेटिव. तो 90% of the authors, when they tell the concept of substitution good, they will say that it is negative. तो अगर क्वेश्चन में उन्होंने स्पेसिफाई कर दिया सपोज दैट the substitution effect is positive for normal goods, then what happens to income effect? फिर मैं कुछ नहीं कर सकते, we can't do anything because question में उन्होंने specify कर दिया कि substitution effect is positive for normal goods. Then don't negate the question. ये ना हो कि आप करके ना हो कि अरे उन्होंने तो substitution effect को positive बोल दिया, the question is incorrect. ना, 90% of the time, yes, we will go ahead and say that substitution effect is negative. But अगर substitution effect positive question में लिख दिया गया है normal good के लिए, तो just remember that substitution effect and income effect move in the same direction for normal good. This is more important to remember. So, you know, if I'm saying that this is this, then this is also this for normal good. Agar by chance in question they have told me that substitution effect is positive, then I will also assume income effect to be positive. उनको same direction में move करना जरूरी है. That is what is more important to us, right? So you just have to assume that this is negative, this is negative. If this is negative, this is positive. If this is negative, this is positive. और इसमें ये greater है और ये greater है. So therefore we can assume that the demand, law of demand, is followed for the normal good क्योंकि income effect और substitution effect दोनों ही negative हैं. Here because final effect negative है, the law of demand is followed, inverse relation between price and quantity. Only here law of demand is not followed. यहाँ पे law of demand follow नहीं किया जाता है. So when we talk about the reason why demand curve is downward sloping, don't write only substitution effect. Actually ये दोनों effect मिलाकर बोलते हैं that the demand curve will be downward sloping. There is another thing which you have to remember. देखो, there is, again, I will do it in the next revision session. There is something which is known as compensated demand curve. ये जो compensated demand curve है ना, this is based only on substitution effect. So compensated demand curve is always downward sloping even for Giffen goods. ये Giffen goods के लिए भी downward sloping ही होता है. So just remember that the compensated demand curve is always so this is what I am saying, beta. So many foreign authors, what they say is that when price of the good increases, quantity demanded of the good will decrease, right? This is my total effect. Now I have to break this in two parts, substitution effect and income effect. Okay. Now when I am saying that I am talking about substitution effect, ideally substitution effect says that when price of the good increases, it becomes relatively expensive. And when it becomes relatively expensive, you should decrease its demand. So the price and quantity move in opposite direction and hence substitution effect is negative. Yehi hai concept, that substitution effect is negative. But I am saying that suppose उन्होंने ऐसा लिख दिया क्वेश्चन में that consider normal good with positive substitution effect, then the income effect will be. ऐसा कुछ अगर उन्होंने लिख दिया, they have assumed that this has positive substitution effect, फिर हम क्या करेंगे? तो I am just saying कि एक चीज हमें normal goods की बस ये याद रखनी है that substitution and income effect will also move in the same direction. तो अगर हमें बोल दिया गया है that this is positive, then I will have to mark positive as the answer. I cannot think about what will happen to the law of demand क्योंकि law of demand तो कहता है कि ये negative होना चाहिए, right? Just that I am saying कि actually this statement is incorrect. It should have been negative. But अगर आपको क्वेश्चन में ये पॉजिटिव दे दिया गया है, then just mark income effect also as positive. मतलब ये मत करके आना that you will not mark anything. It should in fact be positive. That is what I wanted to focus on. You're right, right? Otherwise, law of demand will be violated. That is absolutely correct. वो एकदम ठीक बात है. अच्छा, then I am just skipping these names. ये names एक बार ही पढ़ लेना. This is available on your portal. अच्छा, दो इफेक्ट्स हैं जो हमें पढ़ने हैं. एक है Veblen इफेक्ट, एक है Giffen good. इस पे भी ना yesterday only you were asking me this question. ऐसा suppose एक statement है. So this comes a lot in a lot of exams. even IIT में this can be asked. Suppose वो ऐसा कुछ बोल देते हैं, they go ahead and they ask you that consider when price of good increased, the demand of good increased. This implies that the good must be inferior good. When price increased, demand of good increased. This implies that the good must be inferior good. सबसे important बात बेटा, एक तो ये inferior good जो होते हैं वो law of demand को follow करते हैं. They follow the law of demand. तो inferior तो नहीं हो सकता. This can at max be a given good कि price increase हुआ तो demand increase हो गई. But now you guys will argue with me कि मैम अगर price increase हो रहा है और quantity demanded is also increasing, it means that it is not obeying the law of demand, so it is a given good. And every given good is also inferior, so it becomes an inferior good. So can't we just say that it is an inferior good? Well, यहाँ पर ये चीज बहुत important है याद रखनी, that this law of demand is violated for other goods also. तो जरूरी थोड़ी है कि given good ही रहा होगा. It may be the case that it may have been a Veblen good. Veblen goods are those goods where you have a prestige value attached to it. कि ठीक है, I did not, मतलब the moment the price of the good will decrease, like price of diamond decreases, then those rich people will stop demanding the quantity of diamond. Or when price of BMW will decrease, then people will stop, demanding BMW. So इस case में I cannot go ahead and I cannot say that this is always an inferior good. What if it is a Veblen good? So is this statement always true? No. It is a false statement, right? I cannot always say that it will be a given good. So beta, Veblen goods are those goods where we are going ahead and we are saying that they are not obeying the law of demand, but it is due to prestige value. So for example, I am very rich and I want to go ahead and buy some diamonds to show that I am rich. Ab agar diamonds all of a sudden become cheap, then I will not buy diamonds. So I am reducing my demand when the price is falling because of the prestige. यहाँ पे prestige involved है. उस prestige की वजह से मैं ये कर रही हूँ. That is why it is called a Veblen good. Law of demand is not being followed, but in the background we have the prestige value in this case, right? Okay. Then this is the market demand curve. Beta, this is a question I am leaving to yourself. Iska solution I have provided separately in a separate PDF. So what I have done is, जितने भी questions आपको इस booklet में दिखेंगे that I am preparing, for that question booklet, I have prepared a separate solution manual. I will be posting this solution manual on your portal. So you just go ahead and you just compare your answers with this solution manual. Now, जब हम market demand की बात करते हैं, तो market demand basically क्या बताता है? Market demand is adding the demand of individual people together. So one thing that we have to, that can be asked in exam is that market demand curve is inelastic as compared to individual demand curve. है ना? तो बस ये याद रखना है हमें कि जब हम मार्केट डिमांड की बात करते हैं, व्हाट इज हैपनिंग? I have an individual demand of individual A. I have a demand for individual B. So supposedly I take a price. I say price is 4. And at this price, I say A is demanding 2 units and B is demanding 3 units. So in total, I will be having 5 units being demanded. So what will happen? This demand curve will be flatter. And we know that flatter the demand curve, what happens to the elasticity? Can someone tell me? The flatter the demand curve, the more or less the elasticity. Okay. The flatter the demand curve, the more elastic it is. So we are correct that it becomes more elastic. So is it becoming less elastic? False. Essay statements can be asked in exam and you have to be very thorough with it. यहां पर आई जस्ट वांट टू फोकस ऑन वन मोर थिंग, दिस कैन बी आस्क्ड इन एग्जाम अगेन। सपोज बेटा आपको एक दो इंडिविजुअल दिए हुए हैं, आपका जो फर्स्ट इंडिविजुअल है ना उसका डिमांड कर्व है 5 माइनस बी ए पी ए, दिस इज द क्वांटिटी ऑफ फर्स्ट इंडिविजुअल, और क्वांटिटी ऑफ सेकेंड इंडिविजुअल दी हुई है सपोज 10 माइनस पी बी, and I'm asking you find market demand, and sometimes it will ask you find equilibrium price या equilibrium quantity, supply curve दे देंगे आपको। just remember one thing, just tell me something, देखो what happens when price of the good is 6 rupees, अगर प्राइस नॉट 6 एक्चुअली, इफ द प्राइस इज एनीथिंग ग्रेटर देन इक्वल टू 5, अगर प्राइस 5 रुपीज से ज्यादा है, देन व्हाट विल हैपन इन द मार्केट? बेटा इंडिविजुअल ए विल नॉट डिमांड एनी क्वांटिटी, इट विल जस्ट डिमांड 0 यूनिट्स। एनी प्राइस ग्रेटर देन 5, देखो प्राइस अगर 5.1 हुआ, 5.2, 5.3, 6, 7, 8 कुछ भी डालो यहाँ पे 5 से ज्यादा, तो इसकी क्वांटिटी तो नेगेटिव हो रही है। And if its quantity is negative, it automatically means that this individual will not demand. तो इसका implication ही ये हो गया हमारे लिए that if my price in the market is greater than equal to 5, then the market demand curve will only be the demand of individual B. So I cannot just directly add. मैं एकदम से ऐड नहीं करके बोल सकती हूँ कि अच्छा ठीक है मार्केट डिमांड कर्व विल बी 15 माइनस पी ए माइनस पीबी, ऐसा कुछ, या यू कैन जस्ट ब्रिंग प्राइस ऑन वन साइड एंड जस्ट ऐड द क्वांटिटीज टुगेदर, ऐसा नहीं कर सकते, वी कांट डू दिस। वी नीड टू सी दैट व्हाट इज गोइंग टू हैपन टू द डिमांड पोस्ट 5, and if the price is greater than 5, then my market demand is only going to be the demand of individual B. And this has been asked multiple times in DSC. In earlier days, ये DSC में बहुत common question होता था. So we need to remember that when I am just plotting this for individual A, this is going to be 5 here and 5 here. ये हो जाएगा price, ये हो जाएगा quantity. When I am plotting for individual B, beta, this is going to be 10 here and 10 here. ये हो जाएगा price और ये हो जाएगा quantity. So when I am going to add the two demands together, तो ये 5 तक तो डिमांड ऐड हो रही है। मतलब सपोज एग्जांपल के लिए इफ आई टेल यू द प्राइस इज 4, सो इंडिविजुअल 1 विल डिमांड 1 यूनिट ए एंड इंडिविजुअल 2 विल डिमांड से एट प्राइस 4 6 यूनिट्स, सो टोटल डिमांड यू कैन कैलकुलेट। बट एनीथिंग अबव दिस प्राइस ऑफ 5, then this itself will become the market demand curve because there is only demand by individual B. तो मेरा फाइनल मार्केट डिमांड कर्व कैसा दिखेगा? इट विल बी दिस पार्ट कॉमन विद इंडिविजुअल बी एंड हियर इट विल बिकम फ्लैटर, क्योंकि हर बी के डिमांड में आई विल ऐड द डिमांड ऑफ ए, आई विल ऐड द डिमांड ऑफ ए। सो द मार्केट डिमांड कर्व must have this component also where there is zero demand by individual A. ये आपको समझना बहुत जरूरी है, डायरेक्टली एकदम से अंधाधुंध नहीं ऐड करना है हमें। वी नीड टू अंडरस्टैंड कि ऐसा कोई पार्ट भी हो सकता है वेयर द अदर इंडिविजुअल इज नॉट डिमांडिंग। yes, you can call it as a step function or a kinged demand function, right? So this is also important. ठीक है, now we have factors determining demand. I am leaving this to you, beta, just read this out. Income, taste, substitute good prices, income good prices, ये एक बारी पढ़ लेना। Now just talk about the derived demand. So derived demand is that demand, वो चीजों की demand जिनकी demand is derived from something else. So for example, inputs have their demand derived from the final goods, right? So for example, if I tell you that 1 unit of the good requires 4 labor and 5 units of capital, and now I am telling you that I want to produce more of these goods, so I will demand more labor. मेरी labor की demand भी बढ़ जाएगी, मेरी capital की demand भी बढ़ जाएगी। This, when I increase the demand of labor and capital, इसको बोलते हैं derived demand. So increasing the demand of the raw material is the derived demand. Okay. अब हम बात करते हैं बेटा नेटवर्क एक्सटर्नैलिटीज के बारे में. So what is a network externality? Whenever you increase the demand of the product because of your network. Matlab, I saw that my friend was going to a particular cafe and I also started going to that cafe. That is called as network externality. That I am doing something. मैं कुछ ऐसा कर रही हूँ. Why am I doing it? Because my friend was also going ahead and doing it. So I started. इस चीज को हम network externality बोलते हैं. Network externality can be divided in two parts: bandwagon effect and snob effect. Bandwagon effect is that effect which involves network externality due to fashion. Just for example, all of us are aware that I'm not sure abhi kya latest fashion hai, but for example, abhi tak everybody was using say a particular kind of phone. And now because another phone is in fashion, you start using that phone. So that is a bandwagon effect. Matlab, because you are influenced by fashion. Just aajkal there is so much social influencers, right? So if I just look at those influencers and I just wear whatever they are wearing, I am demanding a particular good. मैं उस चीज की demand इसलिए कर रही हूँ because the other people are telling me कि ये चीज तो fashion में है. Then that is known as a bandwagon effect. The second thing that we have is called a snob effect. तो snob effect क्या होता है? That you demand something which is rare. So I want to pay a very high price for something because it is having it is very rare and it is having very prestige value. जैसे for example a particular painting, ये बहुत ही unique चीज है, market में available ही नहीं है. So I will go ahead and I will buy that thing just to show that I can afford it due to my prestige. So that is called as the snob effect. ये दोनों ही effects बहुत important है and you should be aware between the difference. What is a network effect? वो पता होना चाहिए. What is bandwagon effect and what is snob effect? We should be very, very clear with those concepts. अब हम consumer theory पे बात करते हैं. So these are some names that you have to remember. Just read it out. I am leaving it up to you. So many people ask whether snob effect is on Veblen goods or not. Ideally, yes. Veblen goods also say that you are going ahead and you are, buying those goods which have prestige value. And snob effect is also very similar in nature. But snob effect mein na, I can create an additional zone. Matlab, jaise for example, Veblen effect, I am purchasing due to prestige, but it may not be rare. Right? I am going to the shop, I am buying diamonds. Yeah, I am buying BMW because I want to show you that I am rich. ये हो गया Veblen good. But snob में I may go one step ahead and I may want to buy something which is also rare. मतलब एक ऐसी कार जो और कहीं किसी के पास ना हो या ऐसी पेंटिंग जो किसी के पास ना हो. So snob effect will have rare items included in them. But that's the little difference that you can think. ठीक है. तो ये कुछ नेम्स हैं बेटा, यू जस्ट रिमेंबर दीज नेम्स. आई एम नॉट गोइंग टू टॉक अबाउट दैट. मैं सिर्फ कार्डिनल और ऑर्डिनल यूटिलिटी के बारे में ऊपर ऊपर से बात कर रही हूँ. यू नीड टू रीड दिस पीडीएफ. सो व्हेन आई टॉक अबाउट कार्डिनल यूटिलिटी कॉन्सेप्ट, cardinal utility in very simple terms means that you are calculating your utility in terms of numbers. Or whenever you will calculate utility in terms of numbers, तो उन number में जब हम calculate करते हैं, they are called as utils. जैसे for example, I may say I am getting utility of 4 utils, 10 utils, 11 utils, ऐसे. This concept was given by Marshall. इसमें बहुत सारी problems हैं. जैसे for example, how will I know exactly how to give utility to a particular thing? मुझे कैसे पता कि इसको 4 util दूं या 6 util? I don't know that, right? So that is one big problem with this cardinal utility concept. And because of this problem, we know that we came to the concept of ordinality. ये जो ordinal utility concept है ना, this ordinal utility concept basically, it talks about you ranking things. So I just want to go ahead and I just want to tell in terms of ranking whether the bundle A is preferred over B or not. And this concept was given by Higgs and Allen. ठीक है. तो अगर आप यहाँ पर आओगे बेटा, यहाँ पर ना आई हैव टॉक्ड अबाउट सम ऑफ द प्रॉपर्टीज ऑफ कार्डिनैलिटी. इसमें वन क्वेश्चन दैट मेनी ऑफ यू हैड डाउट इन, so I'm taking those common doubts from the Telegram group. What is marginal utility of money? ये बहुत लोगों ने मुझसे आपने पूछा. Very simple concept. The additional utility that you get from one additional rupee. मतलब अगर मैं आपको एक एक्स्ट्रा पैसा दे दूं, एक एक्स्ट्रा रुपी दे दूं और आपको बोलूं कि अच्छा कितना एक्स्ट्रा यूटिलिटी मिला, दैट इज मार्जिनल यूटिलिटी ऑफ मनी. अब मैथमेटिकल कॉन्सेप्ट समझो. अब बेटा यू रिमेंबर that there is something which is known as constrained optimization. मतलब we want to go ahead and maximize our utility subject to the budget constraint. हम ये करते हैं, है ना? There is a complete chapter on this अगर आपको पढ़ना हो तो. Now, if I just want to go ahead and write this in the form of a Lagrange, अगर मैं इसको Lagrange में लिखूं तो मैं कैसे लिख सकती हूँ? बच्चा, I will write UL is equal to, I will write the objective function plus lambda and then I will go ahead and write the budget constraint. और जब मैं ये budget constraint लिखूंगी ना, how will I write this? I will go ahead and write M minus PX into X minus PY into Y. This becomes my Lagrange. Some people will write Lagrange like this. This is also correct. दोनों method ठीक है. There is nothing wrong with this also. Both are correct. Now, इस Lagrange में इस lambda को, ये जो lambda, the lambda that you see here, but this is called as Lagrange multiplier. And this Lagrange multiplier, इसकी derivation क्या है? How do I derive this? This is actually gone ahead and this is something that tells me the marginal utility of income. मतलब अगर मैं ये प्रॉब्लम को सॉल्व करूं, अगर मैं अपनी यूटिलिटी को मैक्सिमाइज करूं, मतलब मैं इसको डिफरेंशिएट कर दूं x से, डिफरेंशिएट करूं y से, डिफरेंशिएट करूं लैम्डा से, ये सब करने के बाद अगर मैं लैम्डा की वैल्यू निकालूं, इफ आई फाइंड आउट द वैल्यू ऑफ लैम्डा, तो वो जो लैम्डा की वैल्यू होगी, दैट इज योर मार्जिनल यूटिलिटी ऑफ इनकम. I have done this in my maths lectures. If you want, you can read that chapter. उसमें से आप इस lambda को निकालना सीख सकते हो. It is not very difficult. But अभी के लिए you just have to remember that this Lagrange multiplier, this represents the marginal utility of income. तो इसका वैल्यू अगर सपोज ऐसा कुछ आ गया, m/2 px py ऐसा कुछ आ गया, तो दिस इज टेलिंग मी कि मेरी यूटिलिटी कितने से चेंज होगी जब मेरी इनकम चेंज होगी, व्हेन माय इनकम विल गो अहेड एंड चेंज. ठीक है. सो ये दिस इज एज्यूम्ड टू बी कांस्टेंट बाय मार्शल. मार्शल ने एज्यूम किया कि ये जो मार्जिनल यूटिलिटी ऑफ मनी है, वी विल एज्यूम दैट एज कांस्टेंट. Okay, then just read through this. This is just a concept between total utility, marginal utility. अब इन दो concepts पे आ जाते हैं. So there are two concepts that you have to remember. एक को हम बोल सकते हैं law of equi-marginal utility. हाँ बेटा, Lagrange नहीं शो कर रहा. Lagrange multiplier is showing marginal utility of money, not Lagrange. हाँ, Lagrange तो पूरा का पूरा, this entire equation is Lagrange, but this lambda, this is Lagrange multiplier and this tells me the marginal utility of money. Okay, fine. So then you have to go ahead and you have to remember two laws. One is law of equi-marginal utility, one is law of diminishing marginal utility. दोनों के ही बारे में I have gone ahead and I have written it. Just remember, पढ़ लेना वो, but just remember कि equi-marginal utility, it says I can apply it to two things. First of all, I must remember that if I am given a single good, अगर मुझे सिर्फ एक good दिया होगा, so MUX by PX has to be equated to MUM. बट अगर मुझे दो गुड्स दिए होंगे तो MUX by PX must be equated to MUY by PY must be equated to MUM. Now when you will go to the problem set जो मैंने इसी बुकलेट में दिया है, I have given you a question on 3 goods. ठीक है, सपोज मेरा क्वेश्चन ये है that U is equal to ln x plus 4 ln y plus ln z. हाँ, and they give you some prices. Px is equal to 1, Py is equal to 4, Pz is equal to 3. ऐसे करके दे दिया. Then it does not mean that I cannot apply utility function to, this concept to 3 goods. I can still apply this. हाँ, diagrammatically it will be a 3D diagram. मतलब जब हम 2D space में करते हैं, when we say that MUX by PX is equal to MUY by PI, तो इसको मैं rewrite कर सकती हूँ कि if MUX by PX is equal to MUY by PY, so this means that MUX by MUY will be equal to PX by PY. तो इसका मतलब हो गया that MRS will be equal to PX by PY. तो diagrammatically तो simple हो गया that this means that I will have this as my point of equilibrium, है ना, wherever there is tangency condition, यही मतलब हो गया. अब अगर 3 goods हैं, if I have 3 goods involved, so in that case I will have some 3D diagram, right? There are good X, Y and Z. So you don't have to start imagining कि अब 3D diagram में क्या होगा, but you can just still follow the same rule. You can still go ahead and say that MUX by PX must be equal to MUY by PY must be equal to MUZ by PZ. So it's something which is applicable to multiple goods, right? Goods will not impact my solution. You have to remember that. इसी पे there is a problem question and you must go ahead and solve that question. दूसरा है law of diminishing marginal utility. All of us know that as consumption increases, marginal utility will decline. There are some limitations, बेटा ये पढ़ लेना. अच्छा, now this is good. So now all of us know कि जब हम demand curve को derive कर रहे थे, we derived this demand curve using price offer curve. हमने POC use किया था. We plotted the price offer curve, then नीचे we plotted the demand curve. It was a 2D diagram. यहाँ पे ऊपर किया था, नीचे किया था. Right? This is what we have done to derive the demand curve. But there is another way to derive the demand curve, and this derivation of the demand curve was given by Marshall. इसमें बहुत सारे there were multiple limitations. That is why it was not being used a lot. But ये derivation ये बोलता है that I can go ahead and I can derive the demand curve using the concept of utilities also, which we have never done. We did not go ahead and derive the demand curve based on utility. जब हमने ये demand curve derive किया था, we made that price offer curve and all, we derived this demand curve following the law of demand, है ना? But here we are saying that Marshall derived this demand curve following the concept of utility. उन्होंने utility का concept को use किया, and what did he went ahead and do? So beta, what he did is he assumed that imagine that you have constant marginal utility of income, and उन्होंने क्या equilibrium discuss किया था that MUX by PX should be equal to MUM. So he made a curve and he called this curve as MUX by PX curve. And he said that wherever this MUX by PX will be equal to MUM, जहां पे भी ये दोनों intersect कर रहे होंगे, that is where I can go ahead and find my equilibrium. मैं यहाँ पर अपना equilibrium निकाल सकता हूँ. Then he asked, suppose your price of good X will increase. Then what will happen? Yeah, decrease. Any one thing you can take. So suppose price of good X decreases. So the denominator is decreasing. If the denominator is decreasing, then MUX by PX will increase. So then he said that suppose the price of good X will decrease. Now what I can go ahead and do is, I can go ahead and make a separate curve. एक और separate curve बना देते हैं. And I can go ahead and I can call this as MUX by PX dash. ये price decrease होने के बाद का curve हो गया. And now I can just go ahead and I can say that, okay, my quantity has increased to Q dash. तो अब क्या दिखाया बेटा हमने? सेम कॉन्सेप्ट, दैट व्हेन प्राइस ऑफ द गुड डिक्रीज्ड, क्वांटिटी इंक्रीज्ड. पहले प्राइस वाज px, quantity was q star, then price is px dash, quantity is q dash. So when my price is decreasing, quantity is increasing, and this became the demand curve according to him. अब इसमें several limitations were there. भाई जो भी marginal utility की limitations हैं, how will you calculate marginal utility? How will you calculate marginal utility of income? How will you go ahead and how will you do it when there is more than one good? So there were several things, several limitations. So ये इसको कभी भी हमने long run में follow नहीं किया है. So that is what is given here. Just read it out. हाँ, ये एक बारी पढ़ लेना. This talks about all of that.